What's up, everybody? This is Charlie Potter, senior team writer of BamaOnLine.com, back with another BOL Basketball Show. And before we get started, we do have a promo over at BOL. It's $1 for your first week for new members. I know this is a basketball show, but spring football practice starts up next week. So not only will we be covering basketball and recruiting, there's going to be some actual football to talk about, some football played on the field, and that's exciting. Year two of the Kalen DeBoer era. But we know you guys are here for basketball. And as always, I'm joined by Tim Watts and Blake Byler. And guys, another 2-0 week for Alabama. The stigma for this show is no longer. We're back on track. The vibes are high. And so big win over Kentucky on Saturday, and one of the best performances of the season against Mississippi State on Tuesday night in Coleman Coliseum. We're going to recap both here. We're going to start with that Kentucky game. And I'm going to go to you first, Tim. It's a 96-83 win. That's a regular season sweep of Kentucky. That's a big deal. 35 for Mark Sears. We're going to talk about Mark a little later, but a lot of big games from a lot of guys. 19 for Holloway, a double-double for Cliff. I think impressively they held Otega-Oweh to 2 points in that game. I know he had some foul trouble, but to do that with just how prolific he's been this season, just an all-around good game for Alabama and a big game for Mark Sears.
Yeah, I mean, Kentucky, I'm a fan of the talent they've got. I mean, they're a dangerous team. And we jumped out, was it 29, I think, at one point? Alabama cut it to 4, and they pushed it back to 10 or 11 right after you kept waiting, and it did eventually happen. But with that 20-9, you cut into it. Here they go, pushed back out. Obviously, a talented team. I think Mark Pokes did a good job, but just clutch plays. I thought Mark was just the Mark that we want to see, feeding into what he does best. I thought overall, Alabama as a team did the little things that mattered. And I don't know why the slow starts, but I think Alabama likes to chase rather than be chased in some games. They came out hot. Alabama kept their composure. Cliff was big. Cliff, somebody heard Cliff right back. Cliff read some social media posts, I think, came out there a little bit irritated with the slander. He looked fantastic. I just thought overall, I mean, even the game, it's at the end, it had that weird vibe of, you had Sears hitting a big 3 to push out to 12, and then you had Chris hitting a big 3 to push out to 15, and Aiden's doing the good night. It was just a good finish to a game. And I thought, for, change of pace, they closed the first half really well, which is some of the stuff we've been discussing. You don't want to start the first half slow and finish the first half poorly. They made up for that, took that lead, 15-2 run at one point. Against a good Kentucky team. That's a team that's beat Tennessee twice. Obviously has some talent.
Yeah, and Kentucky was a little shorthanded. We know they're kind of back to full strength or close to it with getting some of their top guys back, Lamont Butler and Jackson Robinson. But Alabama's also shorthanded too. They've had some guys pop up on the injury report. We know that Darion Reed's been out, but a good performance. I'm glad you mentioned the start because that has been something that Nate Oates has really pounded when he's been behind the podium. And you could tell in that game he had a very short leash. I think it was not even a minute and a half in the game. Might have been a little longer. And he's subbing guys in. We saw some bench guys go in quite a bit there early and often before that first media timeout. So, Blake, what did you think of that, the early substitutions and just the game against Kentucky overall?
I mean, I thought it kind of showed that Nate Oates understood the gravity of that game because going into this last 7-game stretch that we've been talking about all season, all 7 teams being ranked, they dropped the first 2. And so you're 0-2 to start, and then you're staring down the barrel of 5 more ranked opponents. So that's a little scary to look at. And so you're looking at Kentucky, and like we said it on last week's show, we were like, this isn't a must win for your season, but this is a must win in terms of getting this thing back on track so you can be playing good basketball going into the tournament. And I feel like Nate Oates kind of felt that in his substitution patterns and his kind of zero tolerance, as he said, for scouting report mistakes, bad turnovers, things like that, and just kind of instilled what he's expecting of these guys going forward because he's tired of he's not having any more games like Missouri. Like he's not allowing that to happen and for that to be the case moving forward. I thought it was really important for them and great to see them playing with confidence, especially towards the end of that game. And we see that it carried over into the Mississippi State game. It was impressive the way I thought that they closed the half, kind of like Tim said, like they went down 20-9, cut it back, and then Kentucky went up 30-18. And then towards the end of the half, like the last 10 minutes of the first half, they outscored them 29-10. And that was one of the better 10-minute stretches that Alabama's played basketball this whole year. They played better defensively. The ball moved better offensively. Things are going well with Mark Sears playing off the ball more, having LeBaron Philon in the starting lineup. It was just a lot of really good things that all kind of came together against a talented Kentucky team, a team that's beaten some good teams this year. They beat Tennessee twice. They beat Duke. They were shorthanded, but still that's an important win that they had to have, and they did the things that they needed in order to get it.
And you mentioned it. It did carry over into the midweek game against Mississippi State, and it's another regular season sweep for Alabama. It's a 111-73 win. Just from an offensive standpoint, really, really strong. But I thought the defense also stood out quite a bit. Mark Sears, another huge game, 21-10. The way he was facilitating the ball was impressive. But Chris Youngblood, I know we kind of joked about it in the media room after the game. I don't know if Mississippi State said something to him at one point to really piss him off this year. But my guy has 50 combined points against the Bulldogs, made 14 threes, just absolutely insane against Mississippi State. Mo D with a double-double. I thought guys like Mo D and Jaron Stevenson from an offensive standpoint gave you some pop. And then, again, it wasn't 38 points he did have. I think he finished with 21, but a better job defensively on Josh Hubbard. But when you look at that game against Mississippi State, Tim, is that the version of Alabama that you want to see, and one that maybe might be hard to beat for anybody in the country?
I mean, if they play like that, they're going to win a national championship if they play every game. I mean, you're shooting at that percentage. I don't think they will play like that every game. If they do, it would be an amazing run. But to shoot the ball the way they did, and, to me, just overall the last two games have been the three guards. The three guards explosive. I mean, I think I looked it up, and I'm not great at math, but I feel like that, the big three scored, 2/3 of the points against Kentucky and half the points against Mississippi State, over half the points between Chris, Mark. Charlie's doing math in his head. Look at him. He's like, that is not right.
They scored 111.
Well, they scored 60, but they scored 60-something combined.
Mark and Chris?
Mark, Chris, and Aiden.
Okay, I thought you said two. Okay, I got you.
No, I'm not that bad at math. But those three have put up so many points. I mean, I think they had close to 60 against Kentucky, if that sounds right. Those three, when they're doing that, doing it easy, you know what I mean, and getting those buckets. So, yeah, I think Alabama has that shooting potential. Again, going back and reminiscing, if we had Trelly and Houston out here, that would really be some insanity shooting for this team, which you kind of envision. But, yeah, when those guys shoot the ball, you get that energy. I thought energy in both games was good. Old school Bama guys like me like to beat Mississippi State. There's a lot of bad blood there from Rick Stansbury, Mark Godfrey. I was getting text. They like to beat Mississippi State more than anybody else in the SEC. And it's quite a few of them. So it's good to sweep them. And, that game, Mississippi State, that was kind of more of a battle than we expected down the finish. So to see them come out early, finish all the way through, everybody getting their buckets and doing their job was really good. 2-2, that final 7, actually 4-2. I still count those 2 road games on that 9-game stretch, even though they weren't ranked. I thought it was 2 tough road opponents who's upset some people. I think they're headed to this final 3 showdown that we'll talk about later, which is going to be basically the Elite 8 is what you're looking at.
Yeah, it is a tough stretch coming up. And, yeah, I mean, I think the way that these guards have played together has been impressive. And it has been – we've seen the last 3 games now. You've seen LeBaron Philon back in the starting lineup. It's more of like a facilitator. We've seen Mark Sears off the ball a little bit more. But I think what he's been able to do as a facilitator has been really impressive. You talk about the job that Chris Youngblood did. A lot of those he got those off of open looks from Mark Sears because he's drawing so much attention. So, again, we'll talk a little bit about Mark a little more in a little bit. But when you look at this game against Mississippi State, Blake, I know you asked Nate Oates about it. He had kind of a funny answer talking about the defense, just what they were able to do against Josh Hubbard and overall just a 73-point score for the opponent.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that a lot of the things they did defensively are things that they can repeat and things that they can do in other games. I've always thought this team has kind of the personnel to be solid defensively, not like elite or anything, but they have length, they have athleticism, they have good size underneath. Like they have the tools and the pieces to be solid defensively, and they haven't really yet. But what stuck out to me was like the little things as far as being locked in and communicating, like things that can vary from game to game depending on how you come ready to play. Things like communication and switching on screens, that being sharp, and rotating sharply, and different coverages with different screens and everything like that. Like they were locked in on that side and that area defensively. So whenever you combine that with really good effort, which they brought from the opening tip, like you're going to have a good defensive performance. Mississippi State scored 40 whatever in the second half, but like 12 of those were with like Max Charnowski in the game. You can't really count
Max
that.
catching strays out here.
Right. With 4 minutes left, they had like 63 points. And so that's basically the defensive performance that you got, even though they ended up with 73. And I think a lot of those things are things that you can repeat. Like you can come into every game being locked in on the scouting report, communicating, giving effort, and they have the physical tools to be solid defensively if they bring all of those other things to the table. So I thought that was really encouraging to see a solid defensive performance against Kentucky built on and become a good defensive performance against Mississippi State. And that shows that they are capable of trending in the right direction. Also, as far as the shooting goes, I'm not going to take credit for their hot shooting.
Well, good. Let's stop right there. Let's just stop right here and keep moving.
But I do have to say, on Friday before they played Kentucky, I asked Nate Oates why they couldn't shoot at home, because they were like 40% shooting threes on the road and 30% at home. And he basically said they needed to stop. They're a bunch of old men. They're a bunch of grad transfers and seniors. And he was like, they need to stop putting so much mileage on their bodies and shooting that much before road games. And then they go back to back and shoot like 45% across 2 home games. So, I mean, you're welcome.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought you were about to say you taught them to keep their elbow in.
No, I didn't teach them how to shoot.
I thought we had some instruction coming.
I might have, put something in his head that led to better preparation. You never know.
Hey guys, Blake said to shoot better, put it in the basket.
You say that. Nate Oates does like to get an analytical question, and I think he does use it sometimes. I mean, sometimes.
Oh, I believe it.
He's definitely, if your numbers are wrong, he's going to call you out. But
he will do that, so get your numbers right.
He appreciates it. When you mention something that maybe hasn't brought to his attention. So I don't know if he's bringing it up in every film study, but I definitely think they use that. So I'm not going to give Blake that much credit, though, because that's going to lead us into our next point, is about Mark Sears. I don't think Mark has been the issue. I know he's been a popular topic on the message board on social media, but his last 3 games have been nuts. He's at 35, 30, 21. He had a double-double against State. I'm looking at it. He has 19 assists over his last 3 games and 9 turnovers. Just with the way he's been playing of late, Tim, just how difficult is it to beat this Alabama team when you have Mark Sears, not only scoring like he is, but distributing the ball like he has in the past few games?
I mean, just this week, the last 2 games, he has 7 rebounds, which is a nice little addition, gets you out on the break. 5 turnovers, but 5 steals. So he's kind of, Jerry Seinfeld, even Steven there. And then he throws up 51 points and 14 assists. As you said, there's more to that. I mean, often his first pass leads to a second pass bucket. Mm-hmm. You see Aiden keep working back to that ball. You've seen Chris work down near that baseline. So he's facilitating in a way I think that any college coach, any professional coach would appreciate, because it's not like driving and trying to dish and do the traditional Chris Paul stuff. But I mean, his lights out, and he's hit big buckets in both these games this week. I mean, when it was quiet, I think he ended the 20-9 run early on. I think he hit a big 3. And again, the one thing I think that we kind of sleep on, we don't talk about enough, is his energy. I mean, he's a pound my chest, let's go kind of guy, and I think people feed off that. He's been the leader of this team, and I think you've seen the other guys who kind of came to play. I mean, Chris probably came to play with Mark. Aiden came to play with Mark. I think they feed off that, and we've seen what they've done.
What do you think about that energy? Because we've kind of talked about it just in the media section, just the way that Mark Sears responds to things, especially when he hits a big bucket, or even when a teammate hits a big bucket. I think that's something that Nate Oates has talked about the last couple of games, is just his coachability, his leadership. He's talked about his defense and his efficiency, sure. But that element of this from a leadership and a maturity standpoint, what have you thought of that here of late, Blake?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been great, and you can see it visibly. Like that's the cool thing is whenever you can see him getting into it and pumping guys up and encouraging teammates, and you can see him getting into it in the huddle and things like that. I feel like he's a guy who, like, his leadership, for better or worse, does kind of feed off of how he's playing. And whenever he's playing really well, like he has been excellent these last 3 games or so, as far as encouraging teammates and things like that. And it's really also been part of the effort that he's been giving all the way around. Like that's to his credit. His effort hasn't dropped off if he's missed shots early in a game or had a bad start to a game or things like that here lately. Like he's been great in just about every facet. And a lot of that, I think, is him moving off the ball. Like he not only looks more comfortable, but I remember after, I think it was the Kentucky game, when somebody asked Nate Oates about it, he said 2 things. He said, you need to trust LeBaron Philon like you trusted Aaron Estrada last year, which is great because I think that kind of outlines for Mark the kind of role that he needs to be playing and the kind of role that LeBaron Philon needs to be playing, and how they need to play off each other. And then second, he said, you're going to score more points on less shots, which is true. Like that's exactly what we've seen happening. He's taking less field goal attempts than he was, and he's scoring more points because all of his looks that he's getting are better. Like you when you look back at the Auburn game, a lot of those shots that he made, while they were great shots, like the one, the deep one to cut it to 3 that we talked about, where the whole building exploded, basically. Like that was him dribbling around for 10 seconds and then finding space and shooting. Where you see this Kentucky game, and half of his looks are wide open catch and shoot threes because people lose him off the ball or off an offensive rebound, where it's not him just dominating it and looking for his own shot. He's letting other guys create and find him as a spot-up shooter, where he's been excellent. And he's been able to create on his own and do other things like that too. But it's just kind of opened up everything for this offense, and it's not as like one guy dominating the ball. There's more movement, there's more flow, and you can see it with 98 against Missouri when he first moved off the ball, and then 96 or whatever it was against Kentucky, and then 111 against State.
And another guy, like there's been a lot of guys that have played well here of late. Tim talked about it quite a bit with the guards, but I kind of want to talk about Grant Nelson for a little bit, because it's kind of been the opposite of what we're talking about with Mark Sears. And I'm not saying Grant hasn't been a good leadership or effort guy or anything like that, but just from a production standpoint, you look at his last 5 games, he's got 7, 12, 8, 5, and 6. And now we know he showed up on the availability report before the Mississippi State game, and he dealt with a shin bruise. He didn't practice before that game, but it's been something that has been a trend of late. So Tim, how bad does not only Grant Nelson need it, but does Alabama need him to kind of snap out of this funk?
I think when you look at this team, everybody can't score 15. Do the math. I mean, they'd score 180 points a game. That math's not probably right, but
you keep asking us to do math, and I didn't sign up for this.
I mean, I'm just saying y'all are going to be better than me. That's all I'm saying. But I mean, you look at Grant. I mean, you know what's coincided with Grant's lower numbers? You had a 9-point game from Jaron. You've had 2 double-digit games almost from Cliff. You've had Cheryl with a 7-point game. Mo's going to get his. He had a 10-point game. There's only so much buckets to go around. There's only so many shots. And this team has guard heavies, who are the best players on the team when it comes to scoring. So the big men are dividing up their chances. I haven't really, maybe Grant's banged up. He's 5 of 10 from the field. It's not like he's out here, shot 21 times. He's 4 of 21. He's just not getting as many shots. Other guys are stepping up. Cliff, the last 2 games, hogged some of those chances. I just think, to me, the positive is how Grant plays on defense. He got the hard hat award. We had, BamaOnLine roundtable. Everybody's like, time to bench Grant. Somebody just casually posted that he got the hard hat award, which is a huge deal for Alabama to give that thing out. And he won it. He kicked ass. It was a big win for him in that game that people were benching him. So I think there's so many little things, but we went through this all year. Mark Sears wasn't scoring as much. Time to bench Mark. I don't think you're going to be able to bench. Chris had the bad game, and they're like, how many minutes is he going to get? Jaron, how long is he going to play? Forever. They're all playing forever. This is the lineup. They're sticking it with him. I don't worry about it if he's a little banged up. Maybe he's deferring to other teammates, because there's a confidence with your teammates when you play on a team this talented, especially with Cliff stepping up, Cheryl showing, some signs of life. So I don't worry about it. If this is, again, if his shooting percentages are going down, he's not rebounding, he's got a couple blocks in the last couple games and some steals, I'd be more worried about it then. But to me, there's just, there's one basketball and there's 40 minutes. Everybody can't get, I mean, Mark's scoring, averaging almost 30 points a game.
I'm glad that you mentioned the hard hat award, because he is coming off of a week where he didn't practice. He's dealing with a shin bruise, and he did lead the team in blue collar points. And it isn't the most productive and sexy numbers that he's putting up. I get that, but I think that says a lot still about Grant Nelson. But when you do look at it, like, what is the ideal production then? I'm asking you, Blake, if you have these guards that are combining to score half of your points, night in and night out, what is the ideal output for a guy like Grant Nelson?
I think in Nelson's whole Alabama career, he's never been a consistent, he's getting you 12 to 14 points every night. Like, that's roughly what his average is. But in reality, it's like he has a 20-point game, then he has a 4-point game, and then he has a 17-point game, and then he has an 8-point game. Like, he's never been like Sears, being steady 17, 18 every single night. Like, he has good matchups, and the way that he plays offensively, like stylistically, it favors certain matchups. And then there are other games where he's not as effective offensively, and that's just kind of the player he is. I think what's more alarming, rather than kind of his scoring dip lately, has been his turnover spike, and how offensively it's been hard to trust him with the ball, whether he makes a poor pass or dribbles it off his leg or loses the ball or whatever it is. Like, you can't have that. You can't have him turning the ball over, and Sears has gotten better about turnovers, but Nelson is also a guy who has a higher usage rate on the team. He gets the ball a lot. He can't be turning it over, giving possessions to the other team. I do think that the effort that we've seen from him has been great, and that's a very positive thing, that even though he's not scoring, he's still winning the hard hat. He's still going and getting rebounds. He's playing through an injury that that he dealt with last week and had to miss practice for, and still is able to go out there and get the hard hat and outplay other teammates and the other team in that regard. Like, I think that's a great thing, and I think that's something that if he continues to do that, like, he's going to be just fine. That's what Nate Oates always says. He says, lose yourself in the game, and then the offense will take care of itself. If Nelson's still doing the blue-collar hard hat stuff and being one of the top leaders on that game in and game out, he's going to have a game where he ends up being more productive on the offensive end. I don't know what it's going to take for him to get that. I don't know what kind of matchup he's specifically looking for. But this is kind of how he's been. Like, he'll have games where he scores 5, 6, 7, and then we'll look up and maybe against Florida next week, he'll have 22. That's just kind of how he's been throughout his career.
Before we turn the page to Tennessee in this last stretch, be sure, if you guys haven't already, like and subscribe. We appreciate this on this channel. If you're listening via podcast, a 5-star rating and review is greatly appreciated as well. And guys, this is a big one. Saturday in Knoxville, 3 p.m. on ESPN. Alabama goes to Tennessee. The only meeting of the regular season between these two teams feels a little weird, but it's a big one. Tennessee is number 5. Alabama's number 6. It's a top 6 matchup in Knoxville. Tennessee's 23-5. They've won 3 in a row. So, Tim, when you look at this matchup against Tennessee, I know Tennessee is a physical team. Just what do you make of it with the way that Tennessee's been playing and plays on a regular night in and night out basis versus the way that Alabama's been playing here of late?
I mean, it's a weird matchup. I mean, I was looking at the stats, and Tennessee hit 23 total shots, and Bama had 22 three-pointers in their last game, which is, I'm not sure I've seen anything that insane. It's pretty wild considering they both won. I will say I like this matchup for Alabama because I think Alabama's similar to Kentucky when it comes to scoring. Tennessee's had a great year, but Kentucky's given them fits twice now. Mm-hmm. We've seen them struggle with the athleticism, the length, and getting the shots and all that stuff. I mean, you just want to impose your will. It's not like Tennessee can't score. Tennessee scores when other teams push them up in the 70s and 80s. They get bucks. They had 85 against Missouri. I mean, they've had 70s a few times. But I think you want to be in a shootout if you're Alabama. I think you don't want to be in a knife fight. You want to be in a shootout. You want to be long range and all that kind of stuff. Because Tennessee's town, we know what Rick Barnes is bringing. We know they're playing defense, they're playing hard. They got a mature team. Ziegler's a really point guard. They got a pretty elite scorer. But for some reason, every time I go to our Tennessee site, they're trying to cut Chaz Lanier, who's their best player. That dude's getting his NIL pulled if he misses a bucket. He's a they get mad at him pretty quick, but a very elite scorer and a leader. So that Ziegler Sears matchup, really could tell the tape. I mean, that really could tell who can facilitate, who can lead their team. Both of them will have to guard each other to some degree. That's going to be a little bit difficult. I mean, this is literally the contrast of styles. And after the game, we'll say, of course, that's how it played out. But going into it, if it's 65-61, probably doesn't favor Bama, although I think Bama can win that game. If it's 85-83, I think it favors Bama, although Tennessee could win that game as well. I think it's a great matchup.
What do you make of it, Blake? I know we'll be in the arena on Saturday. What are you looking forward to seeing when these two teams hit the court?
I mean, I think it's a really interesting matchup. Specifically, the way that Kentucky played Tennessee this year kind of catches my eye because Alabama and Kentucky play very similar offensive styles. Like that, they're running and gunning. They're shooting a lot of threes, and Tennessee wasn't able to slow them down as much as they're able to slow down normal teams. I think this Alabama team is a little more equipped to go into Knoxville and get a win compared to last year. Like last year's team went up there and got beat by 20. I thought that Tennessee team a year ago was a little better offensively, and they had Dalton Connect, who I think is a step above. Like Chaz Lanier is kind of in that role, but Connect's a step above him. Like he's better than he is offensively. And this Alabama team's better defensively than last year's team was. And they've shown the capabilities of that on that end of the floor. I really don't know what I'm specifically looking for or which way I think this is going to go. One thing that's interesting that I found from looking into this matchup was that Alabama has not broken 75 points against Tennessee one time under Nate Oates. And they've played, I think, 7 or 8 or 9 times, something like that, since 2020, his first season. Not one time. Like they've won games, they've beaten Tennessee, but they've done it in the 70s. And so I'm interested to see if they can finally impose their will and their style offensively against Tennessee. It's going to be hard up in Knoxville. I do think Alabama has the offense to be able to win this game. And I think if they come locked in defensively and they're communicating and playing like mentally defensively the way that they did against Mississippi State, I think they can hit enough shots to be able to walk out of Knoxville with a win. Tennessee is a good team, but I don't think they're top 5 like they've been in the polls all season. I think they've lost some head scratchers. They've lost some games in conference play in some discouraging ways, some ways that make me not believe in them as much. So I think it's a very winnable game for Alabama, but it's going to be really difficult. They'll probably be 2 or 3 point underdogs because of having to go up and play in Knoxville. So it should be a really fun and exciting game.
Yeah, it's the start of just a brutal 3-game stretch. I know we talked about this 7-game stretch against ranked teams, but I don't know if you're not going to really even face this maybe in the NCAA tournament, going on the road to number 5, welcoming number 3, Florida, to Tuscaloosa, and then going on the road to number 1, Auburn, to close out the regular season. Tim, just what do you make of this final stretch? And it is early to say, like, what is an ideal outcome, but how do you think Alabama fares just going into these last 3 games?
And you look at everybody's schedule. I mean, it's just brutal. I mean, Alabama's is unbelievable, 10 out of 10. But I mean, Auburn's playing Texas A&M. I mean, Florida's playing Texas A&M, Alabama, and Ole Miss. Not easy games. Auburn's got the final 3 games at Kentucky, at Texas A&M, and Alabama. So there's not like an easy escape. I mean, you saw Florida get jammed up against Georgia, fought hard, which I think is important for a good team to fight back. They were down 26 in that game. There's just no room. I mean, you're down to 3, so you kind of like, I'm almost at the end of this marathon, because 7 games ago, you're like, are you kidding me? And then you get down to these final 3. It is what it is. I think these teams have got Auburn does a good job. I'll be impressed if they go 3-0 in their final 3 games, though. I mean, that's 3 tough ones, and they're certainly talented enough to do it. They're worthy of that number 1 ranking. Tennessee has some battles. Bama has some battles, and the race is so close because you want to be in that top 4, something fierce, so you get the first 2 days buys. So just a lot going on. I think game by game. I mean, I think it is, Alabama ran into a Missouri team that was cherry red, which is what Mississippi State ran into this week. And by the way, hats off to the crowds the last couple of games. Amazing, loud. Kentucky crowd was insanity. I mean, they did a great job. So looking forward to it. I mean, I think the season's been a success, and now you're where you wanted to be. You probably want to be leading the SEC. You're 2 games back, I think. Is that right? Yeah, 2 games back of Auburn. But you want to get in that top 4 spots here to get to that SEC tournament, the NCAA, and you want to be clicking on all cylinders. And they're playing well. I mean, they had that bad run against Missouri, but fought in that game. So, I mean, we knew what this was. It wasn't like, 7 games ago, none of these 3 teams were going to fall off the map. They were all going to be top 10.
I like that you called it a marathon, but it does feel like you see the finish line, but you have nothing but hills to go. Like it's an
and you got a Kenyan chasing you, the world's fastest guy. Just he stopped using the bathroom, and here you don't have any chance to cruise to that finish line.
No doubt, and you're right. Alabama sits at second place. They're 12-3 in league play. Auburn's 13-1, and you have Florida in third at 11-4, and then Tennessee and Missouri are at 10-5. And so you get a win on Saturday, and you feel pretty good about one of those top 4 seeds. A lot of things can happen. The SEC it's an insane year, but getting a top 4 seed in Nashville is important. But when you look at this last stretch, Blake, just what do you think, and what do you think about the seeding possibilities?
I think it's going to be tough. Obviously, it's the hardest remaining schedule in college basketball. I think, to get a good seed in the SEC tournament, to get a top 4 seed, you have to at least win 1. You might have to win 2, depending on how other things shake out, but you at least have to win 1. I think they're capable of winning all 3. I don't think they're going to, but I think this team is good enough and capable of winning all 3 remaining games. I think a goal to shoot for is 2-1. I think that's a possible outcome that isn't incredibly far-fetched. I think you can win 2 of them. If you win 2 of them, you're going to be locked into the 2 seed in Nashville, and you're probably locked into a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. If you win 1 of these last 3, I don't know what Nashville looks like. I haven't done all the calculations. Probably the 3 or the 4, maybe somewhere between 2 and 4, maybe 5, depending on how the math works and how it happens elsewhere. And then you're probably going to be on the fringe for either a 1 or a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. So if you want security, you got to win 2 of them. And I think that's very possible. But like Nate Oates has said throughout this entire stretch, you can't look at these 3 games and be like, okay, you got to beat Tennessee, Florida, and Auburn. You got to be like, okay, Tennessee first, take care of that, then move on to Florida, take care of that, then move on to Auburn. That's how they've been approaching it all season. I don't expect anything different. And it all starts Saturday, and it should be a fun 3 games.
Should be fun for sure. Like I said, we'll be up in Knoxville having full coverage of the game. We'll have full coverage of spring practice next week, and hopefully we got some good things to talk about next week with Alabama going to Tennessee. So until then, we'll see you guys in the next show.